Yesterday announced the recall of President Jacob Zuma. It remains unclear, however, when the president will resign. Meanwhile, party chief whips will be convening for a special caucus meeting in Parliament this morning, and President Zuma is expected to brief the media from the Union buildings in Pretoria sometime this morning. We're hoping to get a little bit more clarity on that one. We're going to be joined by both the presidential spokesperson and the ANC spokesperson, so hopefully we'll have confirmation. To discuss this further, we are joined in studio now by the University of Johannesburg's Professor Mcebisi Ndletyana. Good to have you. Thanks so much for being with us.
Morning, yeah.
What do you think President Jacob Zuma is likely to do? Where is he at in his mind?
Well, he doesn't have any cards to play. His party has told him to step down. He is a party deployee. That's according to the ANC constitution and previous practices. A deployee can be told to do A, B, C, and D, and he has to comply. So if he doesn't, then that means that he is in breach of party discipline. No member of the party can defy a party instruction. If he does so, then he's a perfect candidate for disciplinary hearing.
Yeah. So we're at a point now where we actually are very unsure as to what the president is going to do. So we're still even unsure if there is actually a press conference happening today, because last night there was an SMS doing the rounds saying at 10 o'clock President Jacob Zuma is going to give a press briefing. Then it was disputed by presidency. Then they said there will be one, but there's no time that's been given. So it's all very confusing. We're still not too sure. But let's just talk about a press conference that inevitably is going to happen. Do you think that he will stand up there and resign, or will he possibly get up at a press conference, actually give his version of events and explain his side of the story?
Well, he might want to do that. He is someone who can be quite defiant, really. He wants to have the last word. But constitutionally speaking, really, he is driven into a corner. There is nothing else he can do. If he doesn't resign today, as I said earlier, then the party should consider disciplining him because you cannot defy a party instruction. And secondly, they can go for a vote in Parliament to vote him out. So those are two options that they have. So inevitably, or rather ultimately, he will have to leave. He doesn't have a legal ground to stand on because everything else has been done properly. Of course, he might want to explain his side of things, that he never intended to do any harm to the Republic. He might want to set the record straight, kind of live in his own term, because he has a very masculine idea of leadership. So he doesn't want to seem weak, as if he's being pushed around by people he might consider junior to him. So he might want to determine his exit by telling us a few things. But the bottom line is that really there are no more cards to play. He has to leave.
Does he have a trick up his sleeve? I mean, is there a possibility that President Jacob Zuma has a bit of bargaining power left?
The reason for this uncertainty, Leanne, is that we are dealing with an individual who rates very low on trust and credibility. He's been willing to do anything really to get his way. He has a very ingrained destructive instinct, which he has displayed in the past with very disastrous results. So we fear that he might do that. But when you look at it constitutionally and legally, he cannot wiggle his way out of this one, because after all, we're a country guided by the law, and the law says, at least from the ANC side, if the party says step down, you must. If not, then Parliament will vote you out.
Yeah. You know, we heard the press conference that was given yesterday by Mcebisi, the SG of the ANC. You giggle. Why do you giggle? Do you giggle because it was actually more confusing after the press conference than it was before?
It was far below average performance by Mcebisi. He's having a tough time.
Yeah.
He's not a person who's used to being questioned by the media. That's what happens when you've been in power for more than 20 years in a province where you are unchallenged by the media. You're not used to explaining yourself.
Yeah.
So your powers of persuasion become blunted a little bit because you are used to commanding people. That's the one thing. The second thing is that he's also conflicted himself. There are questionable issues that he might have to answer related to state capture issue. So that is why he couldn't explain yesterday why the ANC was firing JZ, because part of the reason, a major reason for that is state capture, which implicates him as well. So if he had said, this is the reason why we're taking out JZ, he would be self-implicating, right? Because the journalists would have most likely said, okay, what about you? Why aren't you leaving?
Yeah, I mean, because there were no reasons offered. And that, I think, it was the biggest disappointment. You know, we're hearing that President Jacob Zuma is being recalled. The question that was asked by a number of journalists, but why? Why are you recalling him? What are the reasons?
Apart from Makgashule's own problems, I think the ANC is a bit jittery to answer that because they are also implicated in that. JZ did not elect himself in 2007 at Polokwane. They elected him. And throughout that, when he was committing all these blunders, misdemeanors, and everything else, they never called him on those things. At some point, they even did a very absurd thing by taking collective responsibility. So they emboldened him. They hero worshipped him to a point where perhaps he felt that he was right. He was untouchable. So the ANC is just as guilty as JZ in this thing because they never took disciplinary hearings, actions against him. Even the Integrity Commission, at some point, they decided that JZ should leave, but were too scared to tell him to leave. So JZ is not the guilty party in this. The ANC is just as guilty as JZ. That is why they don't want to explain, because some of them, in fact, have benefited from JZ's misrule.
Yeah. Just one final question as I wrap this interview. So much speculation about Russia and relations with Russia. And I say speculation because it really is. But so many people speaking about the fact that this nuclear deal is at the center of this entire process of trying to get President Jacob Zuma to step down, and yet he won't. Do you think there's any truth in this rumor?
JZ wanted to stay for 6 months. What for exactly, I don't know. You can't have JZ in office for a day longer. No one trusts him. He doesn't have any good intentions. So the only reason we can think of for wanting to stay 6 more months is to close that deal. And the fact that he has Mahlobo in that portfolio, because Mahlobo has been JZ's running boy, blue-eyed boy, really doing all the dirty works for him. So from that appointment, it was quite clear that he wanted to close the deal. He's been pushing for it. And hopefully the ANC did the reasonable thing by saying they won't do that unless they can afford it. And Cyril Ramaphosa said that at Davos, that the ANC won't afford it. So absent any other reasonable explanation, the only reason really we can think of for wanting to stay 6 more months was to close the Russian deal.
Let's leave it there. Thank you for talking to us. We'll see what happens today. I'm just following news as I'm speaking to you, and there's reports coming in that the presidential police motorcade, the motorcycles, have arrived at the presidential residence in Pretoria. So perhaps some action about to happen. But who knows? Perhaps Pulemabe knows. So we'll bring him onto set after this. Stay tuned. We've got more on Morning Live.